Yes. Okay. So let's go ahead and I'll let y'all begin. We can illuminate and we can connect. And I have the article somewhere too. So there it is. Okay. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm pulling up the article.
Yeah, that's what I did too. I've got the article here. So it's task, text, talk. Kind of a tongue-tying
Yeah.
personification, right? No, not personification. It's alliteration. There's task. I went with tisk task. Tisk for tasket or something like that. So,
Well, I guess like I connected with like a lot of the article because like mainly it just like talked about how like as like a teacher you should be able to have the students like believe in them, believe that they can think on their own. And like in my past experience, like in high school and middle school, like we were so like sheltered that we didn't get the opportunity till we actually got in college to just like think on our own, and like they was just taught the material instead of actually letting us like learn it individually.
mm-hmm. Explore on your own. Yeah.
So I guess it's not like not really connecting. It's just like the opposite, I guess what you can say.
Well, it's a good connection. That is a connection, even though it's an opposite, but something that you've experienced, and now that you're thinking as a teacher or a future teacher is being spoon-fed information. You don't retain it, and you need to talk about it. That's what I like about the talk part. And when you're in block 1 and you're taking, I teach everything in cooperative learning mode, to where we do a lot of talking and group work, and not so much that, well, it's with the test and we have a task in order to make applicable what the content is talking about. But so much of the time you're sitting in lecture halls and it's just the person just delivering the content to you and telling you what you should be thinking instead of experiencing it. So that was a good connection. Okay. And like I told you all in my email, I know it's hard for me not to talk, so I'll try not to talk so much.
On page 8, around paragraph 3, I said for reason for picking. Yes, ma'am. Where it was talking about the disciplinary literacy how it was developed in the early 2000s, and it's a youth program on studies done in the 1996 and earlier. But the question I had was, do the students today have the same ability as the students earlier?
That's a good question.
Because of how everything's changed, and I understand like from what, and they're talking in the article how they're trying to base on the teachers try to do everything for the student, which was teaching them how to write a sentence and also get them to absorb the content of the lesson.
Yeah, I definitely agree that like in earlier years, like even in like early 2000s, they weren't given as much opportunity as like I say we do these days, because we have like technology applications and all sorts of things like that you can implement in your classroom that's more effective than older days.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's where I was thinking, I'm glad, this is where I wish we had our investigator in on our conversations, because I was hoping, because this is an older article and sent out for y'all to read on purpose so the investigator could find something more current. But you're right, it would be interesting to find out is what is research saying now because of technology and to more access, because 2002 was when it was coming out. I mean, it was when I first started teaching. My very first teaching job was in 89, 90, and technology was getting there. Your little Apple IIes or something out there most of the kids played Oregon Trail on, and I remember that. But then when you started getting to the 2000s and 2005 and 4 up in there is more and more technology access for students in schools. And of course now we have cell phones that our technology is right there in our hands. We have all these apps, and so it's totally different. So that's what I was hoping our connector might come across. But you're right, that was a good point to illuminate. Very good, Casey. Okay. Anything else?
I got some more that I just wrote down in my journal. On page 9, where it was talking about for principle 2, and whenever I read it, it's like the question was that I thought about: can the teachers really combine all of these elements, call for the disciplinary literacy play for, because they're wanting to teach, so they're wanting the teacher to take time out of the class. For what I understood when I was reading the article, that they wanted to take time out of the class to do all these things for the student. And how is the teacher going to put enough time to get what their lesson plan for that day to get done if they're going to have to do all these other elements for the discipline?
Can you tell me exactly what paragraph you're looking in? Because I know you said page 9, but I think you meant page 10, because I see where it says principle 2, learning is apprenticeship. And so where were you there?
I can't remember. I just put principle 2. It might have been on page 10.
Yeah.
And I accidentally put page 9.
That's okay, because page 9 was just a big picture, but that's okay. It was kind of stands to reason it's the next page of text, so after page 8. Because that one here, they're talking about mealworms in a science class. And they're talking about environment. I'm just trying to see but I see where you're going with is how does a teacher put all this together as an interdisciplinary teaching, because we have to be a little of everything. Especially EC6 majors, which some of y'all are, that we're teachers of everything. But if you're 4-8 math, you can't forget about, well, there's science and there's social studies. There's other disciplines out there that you need to be aware and make aware of and make connections if possible, because then that leads back to what we talked about just a minute ago, is making application. We can't silo our disciplines and say, okay, I'm teaching math. And then their students, that's all you do is teach math with them. And then they leave your room and go to the history classroom. And all they do is teach history. Then they leave that room and they go to the English classroom. And all they do is teach English. But there needs to be some kind of connection to all of it so that it makes it applicable and you can do more critical thinking and make those connections to the real world instead of silo teach. And that's what in a lot of high schools in the past, there was a lot of silo teaching going on, that I'm just worried about my content, not worried about yours. But really, a math teacher can easily bring in English writing, definitely, because they have to read and they have to write. I mean, one of the best things I found out teaching my 4th graders is if I got them to write a math problem, then they figured out, because it's not as easy to write one as it is to read a math problem. But once they were able to write it and be able to get the writing to tell exactly what they want to do and what steps, then they understood, well, I'm supposed to add and then subtract and then multiply, a multi-step math problem. So that made better connections for them. And that's back to what Ashley's talking about, is being able to apply and critical think.
Right.
Instead of being just fed the answers.
Yeah. Just like with agriculture, there's a bunch of disciplines that you can go into. You can do math, you have your science, you have history, like there's all in English, because they're going to have to read the content. Because me as a teacher, like, I don't want to just throw up a PowerPoint and then let my students take notes. I want them to read what I'm reading, and then we all talk about it, and then understanding.
Right, and have some application going on.
Right.
Right. Yeah, and I'm so glad to hear you saying that, because, well, my degree is vocational ag, as y'all know at the beginning. And that's because that's how I grew up in my environment. But, the more you're out, and especially in the teaching world, you find yourself going, oh my gosh, I can make this connection and this connection. And as teachers, if we could all work collegially together and help each other out, especially if your English teacher is saying, gosh, this year's groups of kids, they just don't understand what a possessive noun means, or how to use the apostrophes. And then, even in the ag classroom, I can add that, and, make it aware and make it a point to bring out in just little bitty micro teaches. It doesn't have to be a long lesson or anything. It's just a little micro teach here and there to remind them, so they can make their connections of what the history teacher or the English teacher is talking about. So, yeah. And that, I know with ag, it's always a good connection for math all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's very important, as an effective teacher, to always implement different subjects, because first off, they're getting multiple exposures. Just like in one of the past assignments we've had for this class, I picked word walls to reflect on, and that's one of many effective ways for students to have exposure different times in different classrooms and all around the school.
Right. I really liked that research that they had where it was out on the walls in the hallways. And I always had word walls in my classroom. And I try to keep everything kind of concentrated, where my science things were together over here, my reading and writing things over here, my math, but then my word wall was crossed. It was pulled together. So, and sometimes we had fun words of the day or for the week, just some real long words that the kids found in the dictionary that they wanted to add to the word wall as a fun thing of how to incorporate it in their daily language. And that's fun to play with. And that could be in any content area. Just have a little fun, either a warm up for the day, or write something before, when you have a few seconds before the bell rings or something, as a bell ringer, and say, okay, let's find a word that we want on our wall for this week. And loquacious. That was my daughter's word when she was little. Mom, I like this word, loquacious. And I said, okay, you are very loquacious. Talkative. So, and that's always fun. And that improves their vocabulary so much. And that is so important to do that, is, for your EC6, but even for your middle school and high school, because those kind of words end up on those SAT and ACT tests. So it's giving them that exposure and that experience, and let them apply it to their real world and their conversation. So, good. Okay. I'm talking a lot. I'm sorry. It's just the three of us. I wish we had our whole group here. But that's okay. Did you have another play area, Casey?
Where it was where it was talking about Principle 3.
Huh?
I just wrote down, can students do all the different areas of content, of the content efficiently? Not just a few students, but the majority.
Right. Okay, I'm skim reading real quick, because I was just looking at that one. Let's see.
I think that principle just goes over teachers just content area literacy. In any area of content, you're always teaching them the key vocabulary and teaching them how to read your content. I think that's what Principle 3 is that teaching them those vocabulary words so that they're able to independently read those kind of texts on their own. I think that's what Principle 3 is talking about.
Right. And what I find, especially when it comes to content area literacy, there is a big divide between third grade and fourth grade when it comes to reading and comprehension. It's because if you look at the texts and then you look at the intent, is you're no longer teaching students how to read at third grade. I mean, well, at the kind of middle third grade, but in fourth grade, you're teaching them to how to learn. You know, you're where to find the information and where to understand how to locate it, but you're not teaching them how to read. However, we still will have students, even in eighth grade and in freshman high school or all the way up. I mean, you'll have some seniors in high school that still don't understand the content because they've never mastered the text features or how to understand what that author is really saying. So I think I've kind of forgot where I was going on my little circle here, my little ride. I need to find the caboose real soon. But is getting all teachers to understand that it's just not the delivery of content, is getting them to use the vocabulary strategies and teach the students the strategies so that they can use them on their own without being said, okay, everybody, we're going to do the FAIR model today. But students should be doing this on their own. I know a couple even, I think, Ashley, you were one of them that I said something about Dinah Zyke, about her foldables. Actually, when she started out, when she was in high school, she developed the foldables on her own because she was having trouble as a student understanding and comprehending the content and to organizing it. So she created all these types of foldables and interactive journaling that now she's making tons of money off of it because she sells it all to teachers today in her little booklets and composition books. So if you ever want to know who I'm talking about, Dinah Zyke, if you've not seen any of her foldables and things, she did it because she wanted to learn and have some strategies on her own, and now she's making money as a teacher. So, but that's what we as teachers need to do. We need to provide strategies to the students so that when they're on their own, they can use that strategy by themselves and continue to understand and comprehend the content that's being delivered. So.
I also think that goes back to chapter 1 in the textbook about how as an effective teacher, we shouldn't just assume that students have prior knowledge because, like you said, they could be a senior and not really know how to find the content in the text.
Mm-hmm.
I think that goes back to teachers mentoring students, just don't assume that they already know the prior knowledge and know what you're talking about. Mentor them.
Exactly. That's a very good connection, a very good point to make. Exactly. Because all your students, every single one of them are different. They all learn differently. They think in a different way. They have a background, even though they may come from the same town, the way they are reared in their home life is different of where their thinking is coming from, their background. So how they perceive things are different. So you're right. As a teacher, we need to not assume at all, never assume anything, and to mentor them along the way. You're right. Very good. Okay. So that was a good connection. And Casey, did you have another?
On page 12, I guess around about paragraph 1. It's hard. I don't have the article pulled up, so I can't.
Well, I'm gonna actually drop down to page 13 because I think you're just misnumbered a little, but that's okay. So go ahead and tell us what you're talking about.
What I was kind of getting off of this is that some teachers might kind of feel overwhelmed with having to do everything, like teaching the student, how to, with this method, with the disciplinary literacy, of how to get overwhelmed with having to do oh, okay, well now I'm going to have to teach the student how to write this sentence, understand my content, and still go on with my lesson and everything else, that they might feel overwhelmed with everything.
Well, I could see that happening, especially if you are a very linear thinker as a teacher. One thing as a teacher, I found out right away, you can have the prettiest plans and have everything in your mind lined out exactly how you want that day to go. and there's going to be a kink. So
Right.
you plan as detailed as you can so that you, in your mind, you know where you're going, but then you're going to take little twists and turns. It's never a straight line. It's going to be, oh, I messed up. I thought they were going to make that connection, and you're going to come back and, it could be that very moment of kind of like almost, I don't want to say teaching off the seat of your pants, but almost you're going to pull something else out at the last minute and say, okay, I'm seeing where this is going. I'm going to make this other twist. Sometimes it may mean the next day that you're coming in and you're going, well, yesterday's lesson just kind of fell apart, and I'm going to add this to it. But you have to be very flexible when you're teaching, because your students are the ones. Your students guide your instruction. It's
Right.
If they're not understanding, you just can't keep on going. Now, I'm not saying that you have to stop and teach 2 weeks on this one concept, because then you'll never finish all the rest of the stuff that the state
Right.
in that area. You have to know where you need to slow down a little bit and know where you need to speed up, because there's some areas your students are going to know well, and if you've done your job right as far as knowing your students and maybe giving them a pre-test to see where they are, and if those students know that content, well, then just kind of touch on it and go on. If they're struggling on that content, slow down and make sure they get it. And this is where I liked being a self-contained teacher, and that meant that I taught everything all day long, had my 25 students all day in my room, is that if the math concept was going to be harder, then I could take away from my language arts time a little bit. I can shuffle my day. But as a secondary teacher, you guys are bell to bell, and your kids leave you. They go and say,
Right.
tomorrow. So, and then you start the lesson over again with a new batch. So it's not as, it's not as flexible when it comes to time, but you're still flexible in your teaching. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I realize not everything's going to go to plan whenever it comes to teaching. I realize that.
Yeah, and then there's some days that you're just not ready to teach. You go, oh man, but you got to fake it till you make it. But, okay, Ashley, did you have any more connections?
I think that was it.
Okay. Principle 5 talks about classroom culture socializes intelligence. What did y'all think about that section?
Well, I think that's kind of like what I talked about at first, is saying having the ability to believe in your students, that they can think, solve problems on their own without just giving them the answer, just here's the answer. Just believing in them will make them believe in themselves so that they can solve problems independently.
Yeah, and I like just in those wording. So culture socializes intelligence. I would just take the word socializes, break down, and just the first main word is social. Your students are going to want to talk. And you need to capture that energy of talking and have them talk about that content that you want them to do. It always amazed me. There was a teacher that I worked with. She was just down the hall from me. We both taught 4th grade. But her classroom was dead silent. You'd walk by, you could hear a pin drop, and I'd go, what's going on? How could they do that? My classroom was always talking. It's probably because I was always talking too. But and then sometimes, yeah, your kids are going to get off task. They're going to start talking about the football game tonight or whatever. But that's okay. You just rope up, because when that's going on, you, the teacher, you're not sitting at your desk. You're wandering around. And even in college, my class, when they're discussing things, and I have them in little groups talking, when I walk by, boy, I could tell it when they shifted their conversation to where they're supposed to be. So that it works for college too. But you're out moving around inside with your class, and then they get back on task. And it's okay if they socialize, because that's where I think sometimes connections of the content will happen, is when they start talking about something else, and then they bring back, oh yeah, they'll see that other connection. So, okay. All right. So is there anything else? Well, I wish our researcher, our investigator would have been here because they could have, what their job was to look up other areas and see if there's new research over this topic and make a connection to there. And see, we had our summarizer, of course, is not here, who would have summarized everything. But
for those, for the people that weren't able to get on the Zoom conference today, like how many replies do you want?
For you guys or for the ones that didn't attend?
Like, do you still want us, since the people that weren't here, do you still want us to go reply to theirs?
Well, I would check it. If they ask you a question, to go and reply. For whenever I'm looking at, like right now, I saw that Caitlin had posted yesterday morning as a connector. And so she has a connection with the, let's say Caitlin was doing the same thing you were then as Ashley, being connectors. Because I had some double clicks. And then I have here is Kira, and she was the summarizer. Okay. And she posted yesterday morning. Well, it looks like at 1 in the morning or something like that. And then here is, who is this? Oh, Michael, which I knew he wasn't going to be here. And he's the one I said that I'd post and he would view our video. And so he's here. He's the investigator. Okay. So let's look and see what he had. National assessment. Okay, he's talking about more of an illiteracy. And he felt that the article did a fantastic job of demonstrating how effective disciplinary literacy can be in a classroom setting. And he goes, there's a downside. The article does not go over the issues, problems of disciplinary literacy. Therefore, I found a website that talks about some of the issues in disciplinary literacy. The biggest issue is when students do independent reading and thinking they do not use the strategies. They use what they know. Oh, it should be what they know, which is to just read it and have not thoughts over what they just read. The other issue is, it points out, is that the teacher's job is to inform students how to do disciplinary literacy. The teacher cannot accept through, I think there's some information to them to expect the students to comprehend it. Okay. So he went to Timothy Shanahan, which is a good source. Don't let content area reading experts confuse you about disciplinary literacy. I'm gonna pull this one up since he left let me see if I can get the link to work here so we can see the article he was looking at. Because Tim Shanahan, and that's a 2017. Well, he doesn't give me the article so much as a blog. This is how to monitor vocabulary learning. So what is it supposed to be? Don't let content area reading experts. Okay, I can't find his off of that site because this one says about a vocabulary monitoring. So Shanahan on literacy. Let's see what else he has to click. So, okay.
Well, I guess we could say from his response as an investigator, finding that 1 in 4 people are illiterate, and that makes it very hard for them. I guess a personal connection is that I've seen so many people in my high school, past high school, that were illiterate, and that it was hard for them to achieve or to even graduate. And there's so many teachers that they felt that they were so far behind that they were helpless, basically.
Yeah, and as a teacher, of course, I as high as I ever taught was 5th grade, so I'm coming from a little bit different lens. But So, I mean, just because you get a student, because I had some in my 4th grade, even my 5th grade class, that they were strugglers, but that just because they got to you as a struggler doesn't mean they leave you as a struggler.
Yeah.
You know, you need to stop and say, okay, I need to work with you. And yes, they're going to take a lot more energy, but you can't let the rest of your class sacrifice it. That just becomes you find other, I guess, activities or some other sessions for your other students to be doing while you can focus on either that student or a small group. That's where I think centers work really well. Even at high school, is during a certain class time, you have certain jobs for your students to do, or they're going to be doing research over here, or they're working on a project over here, and then you work with this one little small group so that you can accelerate them or have something extra on the side, because yeah, they're going to come into you. Some of those students are going to come so far behind, but you just can't pass them on. And that's what's happened. And I hate to say, to point fingers at the other teachers that how they got to you, but instead of complaining and saying, well, if so-and-so would have taught and done their job, and if so-and-so, all the way down the line, it would eventually somebody be pointing fingers all the way to dad. Because that's been an old thing about, well, the 3rd grade teacher didn't, and then the 3rd grade teacher, well, the 2nd grade teacher, and it just says, and then the mom goes, well, it's the dad's fault. But so we just need to stop. There's got to be a teacher that stops and says, no, I'm going to work with this student, and that may need outside tutoring after school or before school. It could be working with the parents more in connection to say, we've got to get this child, this student, which is going to be your future caretaker, actually, because the people you're going to be teaching are going to be paying your way as a retiree in some way, because they might be workers in a nursing home and you might land there one day. You never know, because it's important that you make them functioning members of society. That's our goal, is to make the society even better as we go along. So, yeah. So, okay. Y'all have any, I was trying to find the article that Michael had, but I'm not finding it. Did you go to his discussion?
Yeah, I went to his discussion. That's how I was reading along as you were reading it. But
what I'm going to do is see if I can just copy and do the title instead of the blog site. Okay, here we go. Here's the title. Let's see what this has. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and I'll move this over here. I'm going to share this. Whoops. Share it with y'all. Where's my share? Okay. Okay, do y'all see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
So here's the actual article or blog. It's still part of the blog. So. Okay. All right, so now here's the responder. But what are y'all getting so far? I like this. Continuity reading has been around for a long time, almost 100 years, with its mandate that all teachers be teachers of reading. The basic premise of content area reading, and this is something the paper gets right, is to get content teachers to teach reading skills. The reasons for that are not explored in this paper, but they tend to be a bit murky. In most treatments, the idea has been to help kids better handle their content area textbooks and tests, while other times its point seems to be more advanced general reading abilities. So, and that's what we've been talking about, is everybody's a reading teacher, but here I don't like the what part about the murky bit, because they don't talk about I guess, the exact reasons of why they should be content teachers or reading teachers. Feature district rhetorical patterns, rhetoric.
Rhetorical.
Yeah, rhetorical. Yeah. I just like go to rhetoric. Reading buffs. Rhetoric has no strong. But is this what happens? The authorities in reading education. Well, yeah, it's going to be people from reading education publishing those books. Ah, what do you think they're saying here? What do you think about this paragraph? Well, I kind of like this right here. It says the field of reading education, we're the ones who know how to read math texts, apparently, not the mathematicians or math teachers. What do y'all think about that phrase?
Like as teachers, we've been taught to be able to read, like have reading skills in them. Is that what it's saying?
Well, that's what it's kind of saying. It's saying that mathematicians or math teachers, Ashley, you're one of them, that y'all don't know how to read. Because why aren't math teachers and mathematicians creating reading skills? Why aren't they the publishers of reading skills for their content? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess meaning like back when they were taught, nobody taught them the reading skills along with their area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so it's interesting how there are no math teachers or ag teachers publishing how to read their content. And so because it has been left up, and I like here, over the past 75 years, full of content area reading strategies, all published by reading teachers, not content teachers. But then again, I'm going to have to go out on a limb that reading teachers are also content teachers in the way that if you're like a lot of the people who are the researchers, they were teaching reading and science and social studies and math. So they apply these reading strategies to those content areas. So that's how they're, I guess, reputable or reliable pieces of strategies to use for your students. It's just interesting that mathematicians or ag teachers or history teachers have not come along and created a reading strategy for their content. So that's interesting. So it would be like saying Edison didn't really invite the light bulb, since we always knew there must be something better than candles. Oh, that's funny. This is a pretty interesting article. Or blog, let's put it that way, it's a blog. Okay. Okay, any other connections or thoughts?
I guess that like connection that I can make is like back to when we're talking about math, like that it's like accurate how like math teachers, they don't actually teach you how to, like you said, whenever you're teaching math to your students, you show them how to write math. I was never shown how to write math. I've always just been like a computer calculator or something. It just writes out the math problem and then solves it like that. Never had to write it or read about math. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and then actually taking the time to teach the vocabulary of math. And math is a very universal language as far as when we talk about multilingual from other parts of the world. The numbers are they're standard. They may look a little different in other languages, but math is pretty universal when it comes to just the numbers and the computations. But when it comes to reading how to solve it, whereas I haven't gone to a door yet in my life and went 2 times 2 is 4 and for it to open for me. So I had to solve the problem. Either read about something or figure out something to solve a problem to get out the door. I'm being very silly about that kind of example, but I always did that with my 4th graders. When we went to solving word problems, I said, well, if that's in real world, you're going to have a word problem to solve. It may not be written, but it's not going to be where you just have to do only a calculation. It's going to be, why are you doing that calculation? For instance, you may be putting new carpet in your house. Well, you need to figure out the square area, the footage in your house, so that you know how much to buy. So, but I remember the day way back in my elementary schools, back in the dinosaur days, that we skipped the word problems. My teacher didn't teach us the word problems. We just skipped it. We just did all the pages and computations. Do what, Ashley?
So we weren't taught how it's just skipped over. So going into higher level classes where they do have those problems, it was more difficult to figure out.
Yes. Yeah, very difficult to do that. Now I did have a math strategy. Well, it was math specific strategy, but to read the story problems, I always call it ABC ASMD. That's what my students knew it as. So that when we were reading the story problem, we broke it all down so they knew what to do mathematically. And so that was kind of a reading strategy, but it's math specific on that part. So I guess I should have published it. So, well, if y'all don't have any other questions, because it's about 10:45, did y'all want to add any more to our discussions? Okay. Well, what I'm doing is I've written y'all down. I think we had a good conversation. And what I'll do is, I've not done this often, so it'll take me a little bit. I'll figure out how to get this recording, and I'll get it uploaded and shared in your group so that the other group members can watch it and hopefully respond. But as far as y'all's grading, y'all did great. It would be great just keep on going. What I say is till July what's the last day of this? The 7th. Just check back constantly in this little discussion group to see if maybe one of your group members may have asked you a question, and then provide feedback. And it doesn't have to be long and detailed, but just kind of check back often and see that we have the communication going until the session closes. Okay? All right. Well, if y'all don't have anything else, what I'm going to do here is, where's my more here? I want to stop recording.